that. Unfortunately, the 17th Amendment happened in between that and the time the UN was ratified. The United Nations is a violation of the Constitution because we have delegated authorities, or I should say our Congress has delegated authorities that they were not authorized to delegate to an entity that's exterior to our nation that doesn't answer to the people. So it reduces power of state sovereignty, the 17th Amendment does, tips us towards democracy, as I explained, and changes foreign policy power of the Senate. The Senate becomes more populist instead of and less on principle, which is not a good thing. What are the crisis amendments? Crisis amendments are amendments that were passed forward and said, there's a time frame for which you can add these as amendments. And they did that because they were addressing a crisis in society. We should never do that. We should solve our problems in another way. We shouldn't run to the Constitution and say, well, we got a crisis, let's fix it through an amendment. No, we should go down to the lowest point in our society and fix that problem and not have a crisis amendment. The last amendment, in 26, was originally proposed by James Madison, and it was ratified and added in 1992. So there really doesn't need to be a limit to when the amendment can be added. The 19th Amendment, which deals with equality, crisis, and suffrage. Now, I agree that women should have the right to vote. What I don't agree with is that our national government should be telling the states who can and cannot vote, and it should go back down there. And I don't think today that women are going to be excluded from the right to vote. It's just that I don't like the national government having that authority, and that we give it to them in the 19th Amendment. It was due to the suffrage movement, and it was tended to be anti-family.
The 18th was prohibition, right?
Yes, the 18th Amendment is prohibition. Men and women are equal before the law. It's quite clear that we all are. We're not equal in abilities, but we're equal before the law. There's no doubt about that. And then our founders believed that they weren't so much anti-women as they were pro-family. They wanted the head of the household to have the voice, to be the one voice for our nation. You know, were they right, were they wrong? You can debate that. I think women should have a voice in our society because not every woman is married and not every woman will get married. Challenges were anti-family and anti-marriage attitudes, which is pervaded. You've got to understand that if we don't sustain a 2.11 child per family ratio, we are committing cultural suicide. If we fall below that level, we will cease to exist in society and posterity will no longer be an issue. So as we put in these amendments and focus more on this type of stuff, the size of the families have dwindled and to the point where we're not producing and sustaining our culture anymore. Danger it fueled the feminist movement, which it did. And the more women that enter the workplace, the fewer children they have. And that's just been a fact. 22nd Amendment. It violates jurisdiction and federalism. And it's the crisis of FDR. FDR, George Washington, they wanted him to run for a third office, but he decided not to. He voluntarily stepped down from the presidency, and no president up until FDR ran for a third term. FDR did it, and they said, "Oh, we got a crisis going on here. We got to change it." So they made a constitutional amendment. Now, the people should decide whether they want a person to run for a third office, and a lot of people say we should have term limits, and I say we do. It's called elections. We should be allowed to decide whether we want this person or not want that person, and we get the politicians we deserve at the end of the day. So we should not restrict in our Constitution.
Doesn't that, by not having term limits, doesn't that leave some risk?
It leaves a lot of risk, but here we go.
The ignorant masses might be electing someone that shouldn't be in office.
If that's right, but then again, we're talking about the ignorant masses instead of going back to an electoral college system where we had before, where they attend. If we went back to that, we would be able to restore all these things. It wouldn't be such a risk. But yes, as it stands today, there is a risk. But that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make this solution is not really a solution. It's taking away our liberty, is what it's doing. It may be solving a short-term problem, but it's causing a long-term problem. Just swap seats. And to what degree? Yes, yeah, there's a lot of that.
Well, John Quincy Adams was the only president that later served as a senator after his term in office.
I don't know about that.
I don't know if there was any picture.
Yeah, I'd have to check on that one. I'm not sure.
CDR actually was elected for
Oh, it was for?
Yeah, he was elected, but unfortunately,
serve that entire lot was prejudice of slavery.
So this gives the power of Congress to take it away from the people, and that was the point I was making. 23rd Amendment, which violates jurisdiction, the crisis of residents in D.C. Again, I explained that the D.C. was set up as a seat of their national government. They offered welfare there, and people started coming and living in D.C. It was never intended that citizens would reside in the District of Columbia, which made a crisis of who was going to officiate over there. It went straight from Congress down to the people. And if you want to look at what a democracy brings, you look at Washington, D.C. It's the crime capital of the United States. There's so much corruption there and other things that are going on. It's indicative of what a democracy brings. It was the Less Pretend Amendment because they wanted to say, okay, we're going to give you representation in our national government. And honestly, what they should do is just have one of the states, like Virginia or Maryland, to say, okay, well, they're going to be your representative. But Maryland doesn't want to do that. And no, Virginia kind of given back their portion of the District of Columbia for the most part. 24th Amendment violates jurisdiction, and it's the crisis of states holding on the right to determine the voting criteria. This is better solved at the local level, as I said before. 26th Amendment is equality. The crisis of the Vietnam War. The 18-year-olds were being drafted, and they weren't allowed to vote. Well, again, the national government doesn't own the people. They can't demand that the people come in and serve. So this crisis was a crisis created by stuff that was not right to begin with, that we should voluntarily serve.
When did the 25th Amendment go in? Was that a result of Nixon?
25th Amendment? Yep, it's all in there.
Dates?
Yeah, the dates of the ratification at the bottom. So I want to close today, and I don't know if you can read this. It's a bit of a seeing eye chart from it. But does anybody recognize from where this came from? Or from where this came?
Did you read them off?
I'll read them off. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Number 2, a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. Number 4, confiscation of the property of all immigrants or rebels. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and exclusive monopoly. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. Number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, bringing into cultivation of wastelands, the improvement of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. 8, equal liability of all to work, establishment of industrial boundaries, especially for agriculture. Number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of all the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the populace over the country. And number 10, free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, and combination of education with industrial production. Communist Manifesto, absolutely. But you also notice that each one of these things we've have it in our society to some degree. And if anybody here agrees with any of it, you should go back and see what our founder said and why